Hello and welcome to the third day of the OpenUp HR Summit, where we are continuing our journey through the key themes of mental well-being in the workplace. And today we're going to be focusing on the crucial role that managers play in cultivating a healthy work environment. We will be discussing strategies to support and empower managers to drive resiliency and well-being in their teams. My name is Emma White. I'm a psychologist at OpenUp and I'm your host during the summit. And today in the studio, I'm joined by some lovely panel members. Would you mind introducing yourselves?
Sure. Thanks, Emma. My name is Marta. I am head of people at OpenUp and really glad to be here sharing some nice conversations.
My name is Bas Vliegenthart. I'm a lead well-being within PwC the Netherlands and as well very excited to join this discussion today.
My name is Katja Meeuwsen Nass. I'm a VP of HR at Asics and also very excited.
Well, I'm very excited as well, and thank you for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to our discussion and, of course, to addressing questions coming in from our listeners. So let's kick it off. So whilst I was preparing for this session, I was diving into the statistics, and all of them demonstrated the important role that managers play in cultivating well-being within their teams. One of them stood out for me, and that was according to 69% of people, their manager affects their mental health as much as their partner, and more than their therapist or doctor. And I'm curious from your experiences as leaders, but also as employees, how is this for you? And could I start with you, Bas?
Yeah, of course. It's an interesting figure, but I'm not surprised by this figure, and that's the simple fact that you are at your workplace for quite some time throughout the week, right? 40 hours, or sometimes within PwC even more. And what I also see is that people can be quite attached to their work, which is to fulfill in some kind of way a purpose. So they bring themselves to the workplace. So it's crucial for a manager that they are aware that they, in some kind of way, are able to create a safe environment where people can actually be themselves and use their talents. So that's why I think it's an interesting figure, and also makes it even stretch out even more the importance of the role of the manager.
Yeah, definitely. So you also recognize that the manager is so present in your life and that we connect also so much of our, maybe in a way, our identity to our work as well. So then a manager plays such a crucial role in that. Yeah. And I'm curious, how is this for you, Katja?
Yeah, I agree. And I think it really is very important to be able to be yourself, indeed. Wearing a mask is something that we've talked about at Asics about. And it's so tiring. If you need to be leaving part of yourself, at the door because you don't feel it's a good environment or you feel it's something you can't share with your manager, then that can be very tiring, and it actually adds on to the stress, causing a bit of a negative circle. So we really try to indeed create an environment with our managers where people feel that they can be themselves. Yep.
Yeah, really nice. Thank you for sharing that. And Marta, I'm curious, to what extent do you believe that empowering managers can contribute to the long-term success and sustainability of workplace well-being initiatives?
I mean, definitely. I think they play a key role, probably the most important role. And I think, as HR professionals, of course, we're all also very passionate about this topic, working on this topic every day. But at the end of the day, it is the managers who really need to, first of all, set the example for their teams, for themselves, and work together with HR in carrying these initiatives, in creating that environment. I mean, I also echo what you were saying. I think we spend so much time at work nowadays, and we also build meaningful relationships at work, and our manager has such a big impact on, do we feel safe to make mistakes? Do we feel valued? Do we feel appreciated? Do we feel like what we do matters? So in that sense, I'm also not surprised that it's such a high figure.
Yeah, all of us not surprised.
Yeah, I find it very interesting what you're mentioning about setting the example, because I think that is one of the underestimated themes in our field of expertise, that managers set the example. And also in an organization as PwC, you see a lot of young professionals looking up their manager, and they really copy the behavior of their managers, right? So, and I think a lot of managers sometimes forget that their behavior really influence the behavior of their people. So as a manager, by taking care of yourself and by taking care of your own well-being, you will influence the well-being of your people. I think it's a really important topic. Yeah.
And also not say one thing and do another, because in the end people will follow what you do and know what you say.
Yeah, so it's really about leading by example and being aware that what you do has an impact and that they might copy or take over certain behaviors from you. And I'm curious, this is just a question that's popping up. If you kind of look over the past couple of years, do you feel this emphasis on the manager has changed?
I think so, or at least at Asics, let me put it that way. You do also see it in literature. I think it's always been there, but what we used to have when we're talking maybe sometimes about stress or well-being, that managers at Asics, a lot of them at least, would say, go talk to HR. And we've really tried to turn that around, because it's much more helpful and useful often if it is your direct manager. They're influencing your work, they're your day-to-day contact. But we have had also there, some interesting discussions, managers saying, do I need to be a coach now too? Or, I'm not a psychologist. So it's a bit about finding that balance, I think. But yeah, for us, the manager has taken on a bigger role in the last couple of years, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, so it's almost like an emphasis that maybe in the past would have been more on HR. It's now becoming a shared responsibility more between HR and managers, and they're seeing the managers as kind of like this key role to have even more impact on their team members. Yeah. Do you see this both this way as well, or do you see it differently?
Yeah, and I think it also is influenced by the fact that how we worked has changed, right? I think, and in the past we thought that as an employer, our responsibility ends when people are leaving our office, right? But with a hybrid way of working, where people can be everywhere, that also changes the way that you have to lead your people.
Yeah, we see that a lot as well. That you can't. And I'm a big believer in flexibility. I've got 2 small children, so I really love that as well. But it's more difficult to compartmentalize your work life and your private life, where, if you look 30 years ago, maybe there was a person who was taking care of the family and a person who was working, and that was very much divided. But now I think, indeed, with people working from home or working remotely from other countries even, you've got much more of a blend of where does my work life stop and where does my personal life start. And I think, indeed, the responsibility we have goes a bit further.
Really interesting. And, it's coming across as that you also find it very important that managers, that they have this crucial role in fostering well-being. But I can also imagine, besides us knowing and emphasizing it's important, that it's also challenging to support them and to make sure that they can fulfill this potential in supporting well-being. And I'm curious to hear from you, what challenges have you encountered in supporting managers in their role of promoting well-being, and how have you addressed them? Marta, can we start with you?
Sure. I think the biggest challenge is, of course, managers struggling themselves or ourselves. I think it's a tough job. We all know that. You have a lot of deliverables. You feel responsible for the well-being of your team. And I think, sort of not being yourself in a good balance, in a good place is the first indicator that then you also don't have the wiggle room to also help others. So I think what we try to do at OpenUp is be authentic, be vulnerable, be open, be transparent, have those conversations, keep talking about it, to indeed set that example that it's okay to talk about this and it's okay to share. But for example, what I find really important, and that is more HR's specific role and not so much the broad role that the manager also plays, is supporting the managers in developing those skills. What is the emotional intelligence of the manager group? Are they able to lead with empathy? Are you clear on what your expectations are around those topics? So I think that's what HR can do. Of course, at the end, as we've been talking about, it is up to the managers to really take it home, let's say. But we can help with setting the frameworks and supporting them in the background.
Yeah, so on the one hand, you're saying it's supporting them in working on their own well-being. Like Bas was saying earlier, you're an example to your team. So if you look after your well-being, you're an example to your colleagues. And there's the element of training and supporting managers in developing skills. We talk about emotional intelligence or maybe empathy that can, help in this more coaching, developmental role that managers seem to be stepping into more and more, what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, and I think also, I think we already talked about it a little bit. The needs of different people are so varied, right? And the ways of working, the world of work is becoming more and more complex. So I think that's also another challenge, right? So that as a manager, you might have done a few things in the past that worked for you, but will it work again in the new case that you have in your team? Yeah. Depends, yeah.
Yeah, so it's in a way, I think we call that situational leadership, that you can adjust your leadership style to the person who's sitting opposite you. And that's also really a skill to master. Yeah. What about for you, Bas? How do you see challenges with regards to this?
Yeah, I think a challenge for us as an organization is we are a high performance organization. It's in our DNA to manage and develop our people on content, expertise, and performance. And now all of a sudden well-being comes to the table. So that's kind of a system change, right? So I think we are on a journey and making small steps every day. Are we there yet? No, we are not. And the same applies for the role of the manager. How we've currently set it up is that the manager is most of the time kind of a side job. So our people have the role of manager next to the responsibility of delivering at clients and acquiring and acquisition of new projects. So that's quite tough, and it's a lot on the shoulders of our managers. And next to that is that we see that a lot of our managers are quite junior. You can make career quite rapidly within our organization and get the responsibility as a manager within a few years. So you see a lot of people who don't have the experience, who don't have the competence, or they're not there yet to be the manager at a very high level. So this is something we have to put a lot of effort in. And currently we're looking into the role of the manager, and we will redesign that in the near future. And then we will take in consideration a few questions. So one, do we have the right people in the job? I think it's a crucial one. Second, how do we upskill our people so they are able to fulfill this role? And do they have enough time and headspace to do this role? And last but not least is, how do we value the effort they put in the role? And do we take it into consideration when we look at their performance evaluation? So yeah, a lot to work on, but I think we have the momentum now and also our leadership on board to actually bring this change.
Katja, I see you nodding a lot to what Bas is saying.
It's very recognizable. Time, indeed. I don't have time. And also, indeed, the fact of is that part of the role seen or evaluated correctly with performance management? We've really tried the last couple of years to hone in on our values. We have 6 values, and they're also about leadership and working and ways of working, behavioral aspects that we really take into consideration for the performance, because we've had maybe people in our organization in managerial functions who didn't have the right people skills when that is important as well. But yeah, time is also, I don't have time. This is really something that we've heard quite a lot. One thing that's helped us, but it's not very nice, but it can be quite effective, is really to go into, if you don't do this, what then? Either your employees may be on, long-term illness, not something that we want in general, but also quite costly for you as a manager, as a company. But also people will leave. I think it's from Gallup that they said 70% of the employee engagement is dependent on your manager. We've had people leave that have said, I don't get on with my manager, I don't feel valued, what you said before. So, not always very nice, but it's quite effective to make managers understand that it's quite important to talk about this and to create that time.
Yeah, so different challenges. We're looking at your actual own well-being as a manager. How do you look after yourself first before we can look after others? There's the element of time, like we have KPIs, we have OKRs, we have deliverables, and then we're also expected to be there for the well-being and the managerial part of our role. And then there's also this element of how do you then evaluate their performance? Do you just look at the KPIs and the OKRs and deliverables, or can we also look at the skills that is expected of them as a manager? And then also what I heard you say, Bas, is that, if people grow into different roles very fast, they often get there because they're good at their job. But then suddenly you're in a role and you're expected to be a manager, and that's a very different skill set than the skills that got you there. So then it's also, how do you prepare them and develop them in those skills?
Yeah, it's interesting question. And within PwC, all people who become a manager will be offered a track that we call How to Become a Great Manager, where we also have a lot of attention to these different topics. So how do I make connection with my people? How do I support them with regard to their well-being? What is my role when somebody is sick? So very concrete. But the question is that then enough, right? And we see that a lot of people, a lot of our managers are still struggling with how to fulfill this role.
I can imagine, I speak to a lot of managers as clients as well, and a trait that I see with a lot of the managers, they feel very responsible. And that's a beautiful trait because that has got them to that role. But then it also makes it a very hard distinction. What is my responsibility? How far does my responsibility go? Especially if you were mentioning this kind of work-life balance of that, work and private is so blended nowadays. And if the manager has such a crucial role, where are the boundaries? And that's a really hard one to navigate when there are not very clear expectations maybe of what is expected of you in that.
Yeah, we've very clearly stated, we had 3 years ago we started with mental health literacy training for managers by an external company. It was a mandatory training for managers, but there we also really clearly stated, you're not a psychologist, you're not certified, if there is really things that are of more weight, let's say. We do signpost managers also to the different areas of help, because I do think sometimes it can be overwhelming. And I also think there's also a degree of responsibility for the employee themselves, of course. So there is a balance. I think it is important to have the right professional help, let's say, if needed. So we have OpenUp, of course, but also our company doctor, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so it's very helpful to have that distinction. What are the resources and what are they exactly for? So it doesn't all feel like it lies with the manager.
Yeah.
And I'd like to zoom in a little bit more into these challenges and then to specifically also hear from you. What different things have you tried? Are you trying, maybe experimenting with to address this? So maybe starting with the well-being of managers themselves. You maybe have concrete examples of things that you are doing within your organization or trying or thinking about. Can we start with you, Bas?
Of course. I think it's maybe the most important that our managers feel comfortable having conversations with regard to well-being. I think that's kind of a starting point, because when they feel comfortable in their role and also are able to discuss these challenges with their team, they are also more easy to discuss the challenges with their leaders as well. So we recently launched a training, what we called Courageous Conversations, where we actually put a lot of effort in how do you create an open and safe environment for your people? How do you make sure you can discuss the challenges with people and by listening and really showing empathy, and also give them the opportunity to bring their own cases and their own challenges to their peers. Because in the end, I think if you encourage your managers to also express their challenges and their feelings, then they have direct impact on their well-being as well.
Yes, so you're really tapping into the power of vulnerability here and the leading by example that we're talking about. So if we can train them and help them in having these conversations and expressing how they're feeling, how they're doing themselves. You're kind of hoping for that oil spill towards the rest.
Exactly.
Yeah, really nice. And when we're also thinking about one of the other challenges, and that was, okay, how do we then balance the time aspect? You know, there's so much that we expect now of managers. I'm curious, maybe from you, Katja, how are you trying to address this within Asics?
Yeah, I think it's also, it's nearly day-to-day behavior and environment. So we also indeed were talking about how do we speak about these situations that maybe can be, you know, uncomfortable, if it's physical or mental well-being. It could be, you know, a lady going through menopause talking to her male manager who's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to say? So we talk a lot about what is the language that you use, how can we indeed create that safe space. And I think from a timing perspective, it really is, or creating that time, it's really about creating at the right moment, the time to be able to listen. And it doesn't need to be, because I think sometimes people think it's big, huge, you know, initiatives or, I don't know, meditation sessions altogether. But actually it's much more than saying, you know, how are you doing if you're feeling that someone's maybe a bit off? And then creating the time at that moment, if they want to open up, to really, you know, listen. And I'm sometimes also not good at it myself when, you know, you're distracted, phone, email, Teams, whatever it is. But at that moment, to really be present and try to help. So, yeah.
So you're also saying there's the power in the small things that you do. It doesn't have to be big initiatives, but it can be so small as just asking, how are you really doing? Or making space if you're seeing that something might be going on.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And when we're looking at the kind of balancing then of the workload in a way for managers, Marta, I'm curious to hear from you. How do you address this or try to help our managers in managing all of this?
Yeah, so I think it's a continuous process as well. I mean, you have to constantly be looking at the organization. What do you want to achieve? What are you trying to accomplish? And yeah, which resources do you have? Do you have the right people in the right places? And I think I resonate also with what you were saying. I mean, sometimes the manager role is tough because you have also your own sort of work to produce in a way, and then you also have your, let's say, leading tasks on the side. But I think at the same time, of course, as a manager, you also are expected to be able to say, okay, this is as far as I can go, and these are my boundaries. And I think it also taps to what you were saying earlier. There is also an employee responsibility in this changing world of work. Things are becoming more blended, and yes, there is also a personal responsibility to really know yourself and know how far you can go and when you need help. And I think we nowadays expect that from everybody, from every employee, but I think from the managers even more. Yeah.
And what could HR professionals or companies do to help them with that awareness? Because I can imagine not everybody has that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's also training, right? Providing them with the right resources, also enough space to think about these things, right? Every once in a while, zooming out, taking a step back, also reflecting on how things have gone in the last few months. That's something that we try to do as much as possible. And also what you were saying, providing that peer space where people can bring their own challenges on the table. And what we often find is that managers have been struggling with certain things by themselves, and then when you open that conversation, you open that space, they realize like, oh, actually I also am struggling with this, and that already helps.
Yeah, so in a way it's kind of normalizing and validating with other managers of what you're going through, that you're probably not the only one who's going through this, and that can already be really helpful. Yeah,
it can be a lonely position to be in, I would say, so already having that strength in your peers, of course it's not everything, but it's a good start.
Good start. And Bas, I found it really interesting what you were saying about that you're planning on re-envisioning the role of a manager. You were already talking about a few questions, but could you walk us a little bit more about how you're planning on to doing this?
Yeah, I think it's important that you. I think if you do one step back, then I think it's very important to realize that well-being is not something that you do on the side, but that well-being is incorporated in also how as an organization you operate and also how you perform. So also the role of the manager is not like taking well-being is just a side job of the manager. No, it's integrated in the full scope of the role. So that's why we not only looking at how do our managers take care of the well-being of our people, no, but how are they a good manager? Because if you are a good manager, you automatically will take care of the well-being of your people. So that is a starting point for redesigning this role.
I very much agree, because I mean, we've also had managers and we're talking to them about creating that space to be open and to be maybe a bit vulnerable, but then there's absolutely no trust in the team. And then it's like, well, then that's not going to really work, because, you know, you need to do indeed a step back and start really more with, okay, who are we as a team? How can we get to know each other, build that trust, and then hopefully there'll come that space to be more open. But yeah, otherwise it won't work. Very much agree.
Yeah, so really having the trust and the openness and the space is really the foundational skills of a good manager, and how to put that on the forefront and hoping that the rest will then follow.
And also self-reflection.
Self-reflection, yes.
If you are feeling that you don't trust your team, you need to look in the mirror a little bit as well.
No, very important one too. And we were also talking about the element of the skills of a manager, and of course it's already seeping through a bit in what we're talking about, like conversational skills and making space and trust. But yeah, they're very different skills than maybe the skills that they were using to get to the role of a manager, especially the more younger managers. And what are your companies doing to support them in also developing these important skills? Who wants to take this one?
Yeah, I can start. At least we about 3 years ago, we sat down with our senior leadership group, so about 30 people, and we asked them what they think that they and their managers beneath them need. We actually came up with two things. So one is the mandatory mental health literacy. So I think that was really good to get a basic understanding. But the other thing was actually really surprising for me was they said, we don't really have a framework. And I'm like, okay, do we need a framework? Well, yes, we needed a framework. We're very much on the physical at Asics, of course. We, have our in-house gym, we have run clubs, all of that. But actually they were saying, what do we really mean by well-being? What do we think is important? So we actually created a framework, nothing hugely innovative, but more a holistic approach. So it has physical well-being, but also mental well-being, social and financial well-being. And it's really providing, I think, the language also for managers, how you can talk about this kind of thing. So if you're indeed thinking, I want to spend a bit more time on this with my team, then you can sort of say, you can refer back nearly to that framework and say, give yourself 1 to 10 scoring on these 4 areas, or, how are you feeling? Which one is your top and which one is maybe a bit less at the moment? So I think it's providing a bit nearly the language that people can use that has helped us to make it a bit more tangible.
I can imagine it's almost like this backbone that everybody knows of and can always fall back on. And like you said, the common language. What are we actually talking about? Well-being. What is this vague construct? What does it mean for us?
Yeah, and we had a person who, and I mean, nothing shaming or anything, but he kept on talking when we were discussing it about mental disease, and I kept on thinking like, what does he mean? I'm not quite sure if that's right. English isn't his first language, so that's also sometimes a difficult barrier. So when we talked about it, and at one point I sort of asked, and he was like, "Oh, sorry, I mean mental well-being or mental stress," but he just wasn't aware, and it can be quite difficult if you're talking to someone who doesn't feel great, and if you don't use the right language, then it can be a bit, it can go a bit backwards.
Yeah, I can imagine. Really important to know what we're talking about, and maybe also the cross-cultural aspects of it as well. It's also really important. Different countries or cultures will look differently at well-being than others. Yeah. And Bas, I'm curious, from your role as well-being lead, what kind of initiatives or things have you maybe been involved with regarding well-being and for managers?
The 2 tracks I was mentioning, that I think are the most important ones. And I think and one other initiative I would like to mention is that our managers, as said, can be quite young, and they're also in a lot of situations at home where it can also be quite tough. Before, for example, they just become a parent, having also other responsibilities. So also give them the feeling and that they also can have these other responsibilities in life next to that as a manager. So within several business units, we are now having must-have conversations. And those are conversations that our senior leaders have with their managers when they are becoming a dad or a mom.
Oh, wow.
Up front before they will actually
That's cool.
be it, but just to have these discussions with each other. Okay, what will happen in my, what will happen in change will be there in my life, and how will it impact my role as a manager within PwC?
And to make that really concrete, how do they then have these conversations? Is
Yeah.
it like a template that they receive with questions?
No, it's not really a template. It's a set appointment in the agenda every month, and it will not be rescheduled. So they really stick to this, and every month, and sometimes it's 20 minutes, sometimes an hour, but really offer the environment for our manager to also express their challenges they are experiencing.
And have you seen any effects of this?
Yeah, because this is a certain business unit where we started this pilot, and we see that a lot of female talents we still have on board instead of leaving our organization. So yeah,
That's amazing.
Yeah.
How come? Thank you for
Great
sharing.
initiative. Yeah, because I can also imagine that's one of the things, right, in life. That's like life-changing events,
Yeah.
and then it's like, yeah, some people I think also then put the pressure on themselves to then just sort of be like, okay, had my baby or whatever, and then just sort of carry on as if, you're still the same, but clearly you're not.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah, and also in preparation for this panel, I was thinking, okay, but what were the moments when I had the most support of my manager with regard to my well-being? That were in the big life events.
Yeah.
When I had struggles at home because relationship wasn't going very well, or when I just became a dad and my young boy wasn't sleeping. And then the listening ear and actually be there as a manager, I think these are the crucial moments.
And I can also imagine, or what I also sometimes see, is that there can sometimes be this fear of saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing. But if you really connect to the intention that you just want to help someone on a personal level, then you just can't go wrong with that.
Yeah.
Really nice that you're making the space for that in this way. And I'm curious, are there any other successful initiatives or campaigns or things that you've tried within your organizations that maybe our listeners can learn from with regards to supporting managers so that they can support the well-being of their teams?
Well, we do a lot of role play.
Yeah.
So that they feel ready to have the meaningful and difficult conversations.
Yeah.
And I think we do that every quarter at least. So it's not something that you do once and then let it go, but really continue training that muscle in a way. And an idea that we are sort of testing now that I really like because it makes it really pragmatic is we're doing sessions on making your own personal well-being plan. So really focused on what people can control themselves, and it gives them sort of a pragmatic way with a specific goal, a specific timeline on the things that they want to work on. So it has kind of two parts, a little bit of course, reflection and understanding where you are, and the second more practical part, okay, which steps we want to make. So we do that in general. It's not necessarily only for managers, but I think maybe a nice idea.
Yeah, I think it's really nice because talking about role plays, it's really kind of practicing the skills. I think often we will maybe receive like, oh, this is the best way to have a feedback conversation, or these are maybe good questions to ask. But it's one thing to be aware of those, and then the other one to actually have space to practice them. And I think we quite often see that when we have like an amazing training and it doesn't get any attention anymore, and then the skills just kind of fade. So if you're saying that every quarter you're giving this space by practicing, it really kind of keeps it alive. And then the personal well-being plan, also incredibly useful, of course, to have as well. So it's top of mind and you have a concrete plan.
That's really nice, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's about empower your managers, but they also have to feel powerful, right? So and I think a plan can really benefit to that. Interesting. Yeah.
And looking towards the future, what trends do you foresee for managerial roles in well-being. What are your thoughts on that? And maybe how can HR professionals prepare for the change that is already happening?
Yeah, I think obviously I'll be the first to name it because we're probably all thinking it, but AI is going to become more and more and more. So I think the knowledge area of your looking to your manager for answers on, purely knowledge-based is going to be changing, or it probably already has changed. And I think actually the empathy or coaching and listening part of being a manager is probably going to become more important.
Yep.
I think the other thing that we've been talking a lot about at Asics is change and the pace of change sometimes, things that we haven't foreseen that sort of happen to us as a company, or happened to all of us with COVID, for example, but many more examples, where I think also there, in times of maybe uncertainty or complexity, again, that manager role, but then more the human side will be important. So that's definitely, I think, where we'll continue to head to. I think it's already going in that direction. But I'm sure there's more.
I think also touches on what you were saying before. I think well-being becoming an organizational performance indicator. I think you already see it a bit. I think it's going to become even more established because, at the end of the day, we know if people feel their best, they will also do their best, and it's very directly connected. So I think that's kind of a relatively new thing, and it's here to stay.
Yeah, so really taking in what Katja was saying to really making it a performance indicator. It's something that you're also evaluated on, really emphasizing the importance of the listening, the asking questions, helping them navigate change.
Yeah, not necessarily only at the individual level, but also at the organizational level.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in addition to what you were mentioning with regard to AI, I think it will actually help managers get more real-time insight in how their team is doing with regard to well-being, and can also help them to get early stage signals when well-being is lacking. So I find that very interesting. And next to that, what you already see happening is that more generations are at the workplace, so the views and opinions and the needs with regard to well-being, there are many. So the style, flexibility, situational leadership, as we discussed it earlier, is becoming more and more important for our manager. And I think it's for HR interesting times to be there, and also the time to also step out of our own comfort zone and to acquire new skills with regard to digital and analytics, but also be aware what's happening in the outside world with newer generation entering the workplace.
Yeah, and I think the challenging but also exciting part is that this will continue to change. So we will continue to have to adapt to these new ways of seeing well-being and seeing what work means to us, and also really exciting to see where it goes.
Exciting is a word that came out for me as well. Exciting and forever changing. And with that, I'd like to move towards our Q&A, because I see there's a lot of questions coming in that I want to give enough space for. But thank you for all of your input so far. Okay, so Karina asks, what are the most important boundaries managers need to have to remain effective leaders, caring about well-being, but also drawing some lines about their responsibilities? Where do we draw the line? We were discussing this a little bit, but who would like to take this one and elaborate a bit more?
Yeah, at Asics we have tried to draw that line, but I think we've given instructions, but I think it's still very on an individual level how that's then taken. So I think it's a good question and a difficult question. We have said, if more help is needed, these are areas where an employee can go to because you're not responsible for, the health you can't be their psychologist. So we have sort of set those boundaries, but I do think it's very difficult. And I think it's also really a personal style. Where do you still feel comfortable or where not? We have said, if you think there is real danger or any other sort of situation that you really are worried for your employee, then absolutely seek professional help. But before that, there's a whole journey where it can be difficult to decide this is where I need to step out So not really an answer, I guess. Sorry, Karina.
Well, but it's validating that it's hard, right?
Yeah.
I think that's also important. Did any of you want to add anything?
It's very hard, and I think in the end, it's about empowering people to take control over their own well-being, and also help in our case, young professionals with how can I take control. But it's also in the end not your responsibility, but also the responsibility of the people themselves.
Yeah, and if I'd even translate that to my own role, if I look at my work as a psychologist with clients, I always explain to them, I want to get you to a place that you can do it yourself, so that you're not dependent on me. And in a way, that's also what I'm hearing back from the managerial role, that a lot of it is also, that you're able to empower others. So we're empowering managers to empower their team to also work on things themselves. And you're there to support where needed, but a lot of the time, a lot of things they can also do themselves, but it's just nudging them also in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, different people have different boundaries. I think it's more creating that space where people feel safe to express when their boundaries are reached. Yeah.
Definitely, and that there's also personal differences, of course, in this as well that we also need to acknowledge. I have another question from Lucilla, and she asks, how do you suggest a team member effectively communicates with their manager about behaviors or actions from their manager that are affecting their well-being? Who would like to take this one?
I can start, maybe.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, tough question. Of course, the first thing that were popping in my head while you were reading the question is like, of course, I would need to know what is the feedback culture of this company. What are the actual cultures that are involved? Are we both from the same country or not? Do we have the same understandings around what being direct or not mean? Without knowing all of that, I would say, directly, honestly, authentically, and with care.
Yeah. Any additions?
Very spot on.
Spot on. Let's move on to the next question. Hopefully this was enough. And sometimes we do miss context, of course, of these questions, but I think this is a really good pointers to keep in mind when having the conversation. Luciana asks, do you think there is a difference in the impact of managers in the team depending on the age range, Gen Z, millennials, etc., of the team members? Do you want to take this one, Katja?
Yeah, I think there are definitely generational differences, but I think if you're just open to understanding and learning, I mean, I'm not on TikTok and I heard my team talk about it and I'm like, oh gosh, you've got to show me and tell me. And I think if you're just willing to sort of, go into that space, even if it's not necessarily your own, then it shouldn't be a barrier, hopefully not.
So it's really the openness and the curiosity, and as long that is there, then it should be okay.
Yeah. I think in the end it shouldn't, and it's all about putting yourself in the shoes of another person.
Yeah.
To set aside your own assumptions you sometimes have with another generation. But that's an ideal world, right? But it can be tough, of course. But then you have to put more effort into it.
Yeah, maybe that also links into maybe the biases or the self-awareness that we were also talking about, that you're aware of what you think about things, but then with the openness and the curiosity, you can maybe expand those beliefs. So Marianne asks, do you think that in the future the role of managers will step away from the technical skills of someone and be more focused on actual managing capacities? For example, the manager of a tax team will not necessarily need to be a tax expert, but more of a team management expert.
I mean, I think you see that already, perhaps not in every industry or every company size. I think it's a strategic choice you need to make as a company if you want to go into that direction or not. I think, indeed, as we were saying, relationships at work are becoming more complex. Your balance with life is becoming more complex. So it could be, indeed, that it goes more into that direction. I can't see it happening.
And we're currently having a discussion, does a manager needs to be involved in performance evaluation, yes or no? So can I actually coach my team in a better way when somebody else is evaluating performance? So that's also very interesting. So you see a lot of discussions in this area, and I think sometimes we think, oh, we need more managers, and then we have more managers, and then we need less managers, so it also comes and goes a bit, right? Yeah.
Interesting. So is it even needed to be the coach and the person who evaluates the performance, or is that something that maybe should be split in the future? Yeah, and then what you were also saying before, a strategic decision from the company, maybe on an organizational level already, what do we want to do with the role and what is needed for the specific work that needs to be done?
I mean, personally, I think it helps to have done the trade yourself to be able to then understand the nuances of it. At least that's my experience, but I can see also how there are certain industries where you might benefit from separating that role a little bit more.
Yeah, so maybe it's a bit more industry specific then.
Yeah, and because we're a relatively compact organization, relatively flat, we sometimes struggle with people wanting to develop themselves further and not always having a clear possibility. I think it's a bit different than, for example, at PwC. But we believe in transferable skills. So, for example, we've had recently that someone who was more in trade marketing is now going to be the director for our digital marketing. She has that background a bit as well. She's knowledgeable, but she has definitely a team of experts. But one of the things that we discussed was the transferable skills around leadership and managing that team. So, yeah, I think, again, if you're at least open and willing to learn, because you need to have some knowledge at least, but I don't think you need to be the expert.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you. Moving on to a next question from Anna. The way to deal with mental health depends also on the person's cultural and geographical background. Is it something that is taken into account, just not language but culture, especially in multicultural companies?
Yeah, we see that a lot. I think we have over 130 nationalities in our office here in Hoofddorp. And it's amazing. We did an exercise with the HR team where we had like a rope on the floor and we said cross the line if, and we did a few of them like you were brought up to speak about mental well-being or not, or that kind of thing. And it was really interesting because we saw certain people from certain countries were stepping over or not. We talk about that quite a lot because we have so many cultures, because we also see that sometimes when we have conflict or, that sometimes it's just lost in translation, literally, and they've just really taken things the wrong way. Also just work things, not even difficult subjects like mental well-being. So yeah, it's a big one for us.
I can imagine.
I think that's indeed why the common language that you were talking about, it also becomes even more important the more nationalities and the more diversity you have on the table.
Yeah, but also powerful, because I can imagine doing an exercise like that also, on the one hand we have the differences, but we have so much similarities as well. So that also emphasizes the beauty of that too, I think.
Yeah.
And Eva asks a next question. Do you make addressing well-being or mental health a formal conversation between managers and employees outside of performance conversations? I think, Bas, you were mentioning some things about this.
I think it's both. I think it's both. It should be a part of, and in our process, it's a part of the formal discussions you have with your people. So a part of performance evaluation. But even more important is that you are there when it's really needed, and that is outside the formal process.
Yeah.
So, and next to that, regularly checking in with your people how they are doing is extremely important. So, both.
Yeah, so it really needs to be both. And Natalie asks, how do you balance the messaging of these proactive approaches with the need to performance manage or have the difficult conversations when needed?
Yeah, that's a good question. We're trying to establish more of a performance culture. I think we're doing well, but it could be more. And some people have mistaken this new sort of direction for the last couple of years around talking about these aspects as you don't need to perform. And that's not true. We're not a charity. We're a business at the end of the day. But actually, by addressing these subjects more proactively, we're hoping that in the end, people feel, more happy at Asics, more engaged, and also perform better. So I think you need one for the other, and it's not, it's not contradictory. But I can see the mistake, or not a mistake. I can see that thinking, because that's some of the questions we also had internally.
Yeah, so you need the one and the other. The one leads to the other. So if we focus on well-being, then we're hoping that productivity and performance will result from that.
Yeah.
And also the other way around, you also need to feel challenged and that you are growing in order to feel well. I think, indeed, the conversation around well-being is not avoiding tension, is not avoiding difficult conversations. It's also tackling them head-on.
Yeah, and I think what I've noticed a lot in conversations recently about well-being, it's not just about preventing, of course, negative outcomes. It's also focusing on how do people thrive? Is there a good match between the roles? How are you feeling in your team? Do you feel valued? All of these things contribute to how well you feel within your company, and of course then results into how you perform within the company.
Yeah, I think that's extremely important. Also, be honest with regard to that. We phrased well-being as be well, work well, happy, healthy, and productive. Mm-hmm. So really make it a connection between these dimensions, because in the end, that's the only way that I get everybody on board on this team, and also to have an honest discussion with people when there's no match with the job, because that influences your well-being directly. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Probably no one's really happy if they're also not feeling that they're, often those conversations are difficult, but sometimes it also leads to, actually, I also don't really, I'm not really happy. Yeah.
And we have a final question I would like to give some attention to. And it's a question from Daniela. She says, I love what was said about making well-being an organizational performance indicator. I think you mentioned that, Marta. I may have missed a part, but curious to know, is this already implemented in some companies?
Not for us. We focus on evaluating our managers on the KPIs that they have, and then the values that they show at work. So we have our 6 internal values. So that's working as a team, being prepared, and a few others. But we don't have it. I like the idea as well, so I may steal it. But I like that idea. But we don't have it as a clear KPI.
Yeah. So it's resonating, but it's not there yet.
No. Yeah.
I think it's relatively new. I've seen it pop up on LinkedIn and in some reports. I think it was a Deloitte article, but I think it's relatively new. But I'm also curious in practice, how does that mean?
How does it look like?
And tomorrow we'll talk more about how to measure well-being. Maybe that's the first step.
We're making small steps. I think we're at the same stage as you are. And we're really making the change now to behavior. Also of our leadership is not what your results are, but how do you get to your results? What behavior did you show to get to these results? And in our new framework, we incorporated several behaviors with regard to well-being. So I hope when we're at the table next year that we have some first results on that.
That would be interesting to see.
That would be great to have a reunion and then reflect on how it was.
Yeah.
Well, with that, I think it's time to wrap up our session. And I want to say a big thank you to Marta, Bas, and Katja for your very valuable input. I really enjoyed our discussion and hearing all of your insights and ideas, and I'm sure our listeners did too. And for all the listeners who would like to take a few breaths before moving on to the rest of their day, please stay in the call and you can do a short meditation exercise with my colleague Judith. But for now, from me, I wish you a good day. Thank you so much for joining, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you tomorrow, where we will be exploring ways to measure mental well-being in your organization. Bye-bye.
Welcome to day 3 of our HR Summit. We're midway through the week, and it's the perfect time to pause, to refocus our energies. After today's discussion, let's take a few moments to release any built-up tension and recharge for the remaining days. This mindfulness session will help you reset and refocus, allowing you to approach the rest of the week with renewed energy and clarity. Let's take a deep breath and begin. take a moment to sit relaxed and comfortably. You can close your eyes or leave them slightly open if you find this more comfortable. Try to sit up straight with an upright spine, but at the same time, soften your shoulders. We will do a short body scan to get in touch with our bodies. Start with a full inhalation and a long exhalation. Then bring your attention to the top of your body, your head, face, neck, and your shoulders. Maybe you can notice what you can feel there. Then move your attention down to the arms and hands. Feel the back of the body and the front of the body. Feel for a moment how you sit. Feel the contact of your body with the chair. Then turn your attention to your thighs, lower legs, and feet. Notice if there are certain places in the body that require some more attention. Without reacting to it directly, just notice how it feels. And then we are already at the end of this short exercise. You can slowly start moving again. Stretch a little and then open your eyes again. With this brief body scan, you've reconnected with your body and mind, shedding any stress that may have accumulated. As you go forward, carry the sense of renewed focus with you. A clear mind leads to clear actions. Thank you for participating, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow as we wrap up our week with another moment of peace.